Welcome back to MH Studios. My name's Melanie. I'm going to tell you how I made this birdhouse. And along the way, I'll give you tips and tricks on how I prepare everything for assembly. I start by designing something on the computer, and I use a program called Lightburn to prepare it after design for the laser engraving, which I'm doing here. I do have other videos on how I did the engraving, and I will link those at the end of this video so you can check those out if you're interested. Now after it's all done, I will put it on the bandsaw and just cut the edges which form the shape of the birdhouse itself. So the sides I'm taking off now, and then I do the angle, and that's about a 22.5 inch angle, and it's half of a 45, and I try to keep the birdhouses either at 45 or this angle here 22.5. So after I get all those angles cut, I bring them over here to the benchtop sander and just clean up the edges so they're not, all that hairy stuff is gone. You can see I'm doing that now. Anyway, once that's done, it's nice and clean, and when I put it together, those little hairy pieces of fibers aren't going to get in the way of the glue up. Now I'm using a Forstner bit to secure the hole where the bird will enter into the birdhouse. And I think I used 1 1/8 inch, 1 1/4. Some people are very, very specific about the size of the hole, depending on the size of the bird or the kind of bird even that goes into it. I try to go with an average size, and depending on the size of the birdhouse itself. So there's more hairy stuff there. This is plywood, so it's natural that it's going to have those little hairy fibers. I sand those off and move on to the next step, which is colorizing. So I bought these alcohol inks, and I really like the way they soak into the wood. Got to be careful, though, if you're going to use these alcohol inks, because they can bleed. So you have to, you can see I've got lines that were made there from the etching, so I think that they're not going to be a big issue with bleeding. But I wanted to do certain colors for this birdhouse, and complementary colors, actually, the red on the bird and then the green in the tree. So you'll see how that turned out. So here you can see me cutting what I call log cookies on the bandsaw, and I just do these slices, and this is how I book match things. 2 slices, and then shaped like a book, they mirror each other, so it's a very cool look. And this is spalted maple that I'm cutting now, and I used spalted maple on the roof also, which I'm working on now. So I use this Merlin 2 grinder. It's a 2-inch grinder, and I've got a 3-inch 80 grit grinder on this, and I'm just taking off the rough marks from the bandsaw and just smoothing it down, and I'll eventually sand it by hand and then put a finish and a wax on it. But I'm smoothing down these edges, and you can see I've already cut it, and you can see I also put on the back, which is a piece of red cedar, western red cedar. It's book matched, and then I also put spalted maple on top of that. As you can see in this picture, I have some embellishments on there, and I'll talk about that later. But at the peak, I also put a piece of white cedar. So once everything was sanded down, I put some more embellishments, some twigs, just to kind of work as molding, but also give it a more earthy feel and look. And I'm just finishing off some gaps and holes the same way molding works. I like to do these fine details because I think that sets these birdhouses apart from other birdhouses that are created. So finally I added a piece of walnut at the very peak, a ridge line if you will, more twigs, some gemstones, a resin half ball. So when I'm doing a resin pour and I have leftover resin, I don't like to throw it out, so I make these forms that I can then incorporate later into other objects such as this birdhouse. Here are some additional resin pour shapes, and this is flat stone and antler that I also incorporate beads, different colored beads, and some gemstones there, as well as all of these multicolored gemstones, 2 pieces of wood. One is Paduke and the other is Bolivian rosewood, and some shells. And this one, the far left, is crepe myrtle. It's a log cookie, and I also have some cherry burl there. What I do with little cut-offs is I save them, and I incorporate those in a form of molding into my birdhouses. You might be able to imagine just how much work and sanding goes into every little piece that I put into a birdhouse. And finally, these are slices of quartz that I have picked up and purchased over the years. These I've incorporated into my lamps. There'll be a link below to my lamps. My next birdhouse video is going to be about this birdhouse. It's already made, but I'll just give you the details on how I made it. Now back to talking about my mama and baby birdhouse. I also added a rough raw twig to break up the space between the cedar and the spalted maple, and I'm happy with the way this turned out. This is a very motherly kind of birdhouse, and I think someone who appreciates watching the babies hatch and grow would appreciate this. Now I also added to the back a little faux door with a roof, so just for fun. This is the final shot with the urethane on it, sanded, and then wax coating on top. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe, please like, and I will be posting another one next week, 5 o'clock on Saturday.